Hello, this is John Harbour from Exclusive Scottish Visits, welcoming you back to the unique Scotland audio podcast. I'm speaking to you from Helensburgh today. It's about 25 miles northwest of Glasgow and sits on the River Clyde. Lovely weather here today, and as soon as I finish this podcast, I may just head up to the golf course, which is just by Loch Lomond, and have a round of golf. No rest for the wicked, as they say. Well, if you're new to my podcasts, I try to share with you an experience, albeit virtually, of the real Scotland, its people, its customs and traditions, and some of the amazing places to visit, and there are many, with castles, palaces, or the beautiful landscapes amongst the mountains and the glens. My last two podcast episodes were on a virtual tour of the Isle of Skye, and the third episode will be released next week. However, I am taking a quick break from the tour to answer many questions I've had about what's going on in Scotland today, what's in the news, and how are we coping with COVID-19. Well, I'm delighted to respond to your queries, and I ask you to keep them coming, either directly to me, John at exclusivescottishvisits.co.uk, or through my website, Exclusive Scottish Visits, and I'll always get back to you. To give an idea as to what is going on in the news in Scotland during this very difficult time of the coronavirus pandemic, I'm going to refer to the main news that dominates the headlines in the newspapers. Of course, COVID still dominates, and we seem to be heading into the blame game territory. That's where armchair experts using brilliant hindsight to say what they would have done differently to save the world. Okay, well, to the headlines. In UK, we seem to have come through the worst, and the lockdown that's kept us close to home over the last 4 months is finally being lifted, with shops reopening and people getting back to work, albeit with social distancing measures in force, and the wearing of face masks now becoming the norm. In the UK, we very sadly lost about 45,000 people to the pandemic, and thankfully that figure has sort of stabilised, although the virus has not gone away completely. Well, will it ever? I expect not, and there will always be a danger from it until at least a vaccine is found. Of course, what I've given you is an overall picture in the United Kingdom, but I should point out that the United Kingdom is made up of 4 countries: England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. And just to clarify the difference between the UK and Great Britain, well, whereas the 4 countries make up the UK, only 3 countries, and that's England, Scotland and Wales, make up Great Britain. It's the island of Great Britain. So I hope that's simple to understand. I tell you this because to give you the current news in Scotland, you have to understand that this country, in which I live, has its own parliament and devolved government. And in effect, it has devolved powers handed down from the United Kingdom government, such as health, tourism, justice, energy, etc. It does not have authority over defence and foreign policy, but the powers are still wide-ranging. There are 4 main parties in Scotland. That's the Scottish National Party, the Conservative and Unionist Party, the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats. One question I often get asked by my guests is whether or not Scotland will become a totally independent country once more. Well, I can't answer that directly, but that is the stated aim of the Scottish Nationalists, the party in power at the moment, with nationalism at the heart of their policies. Everything they do is towards that aim, and so much political energy seems to be expended on this issue. Scotland did have an independence referendum in 2014, and there was a 55 to 45 vote against independence, but the Scottish National Party have not and will not let the matter rest. Even though they said the vote would be accepted and would not be revisited for a generation, they continue to plead their case. Please take this as an overview of the present situation rather than a political opinion. So, not surprising, the headlines once more are full of talk from the nationalist politicians on the subject of independence. One headline, for example, says, Scottish election in 2021, that's for the Scottish Parliament that's coming up next May, could give mandate to the SNP. What they mean by that is if the SNP win an outright majority, they could have, in their minds anyway, a mandate for independence. The argument is that a resounding victory for the SNP is an indicator that the people of Scotland want independence. This is a little disingenuous because although the SNP may have a majority in Scotland, in the Scottish Parliament, they do not have a majority in the country. The other parties in effect split the vote for the opposition, giving SNP a majority. And on top of that, of course, they have to get permission from the United Kingdom government, or Parliament in Westminster, and it's been made quite clear by the Prime Minister that will not be given. However, that's politics and will be resolved by politicians. But I hope that this gives you a flavour of what Scotland is still going through 6 years after the once-in-a-lifetime vote for independence. It's a bit unsettling and divisive, so it will be interesting to see how it plays out, and I'll try and keep you updated as much as I can, certainly towards the election next year. On the other hand, there's a story in the Scotsman newspaper, headline, Coronavirus shows benefit of union and the perils of independence. Well, the main argument in this article is that Scotland would have been financially broken by the pandemic, and only being part of a greater, richer union with unprecedented levels of financial support was Scotland able to survive. And so the argument will rage on, so as I say, watch this space. Other headlines include, Fight the Flab. Boris Johnson, our Prime Minister, is to ban junk food, deals in war on obesity crisis. Well, this has been a continuous theme over the last few years to bring down the number of obese people who appear to suffer a greater number of illnesses such as diabetes and heart complaints. I also note in some of the newspapers that gymnasiums are going to open soon to allow people to exercise once more. As it happens, some outside gyms have already started up, and that actually may become the norm, certainly while coronavirus is still around. Next headline, Cover Up. Holidaymakers should wear face masks at all times and should become the new normal. Well, I must say this is becoming the new normal, and even as I strolled out this morning I saw people wearing face masks along the street. And in Scotland at the moment it's mandatory to wear face masks in enclosed spaces such as shops or public transport. I have to say though, photographs of holidaymakers strolling along the beaches with their ice cream cones and wearing face masks looks a bit farcical, but this is the new norm and we're just going to have to get used to it. The next headline is Taxing Times. Looks like Britain faces decades of high taxes to repair the finances of the virus. Well, there is a bit of an inevitability in that statement. I mean, Britain was going to borrow about £55 billion this year alone, but has already spent £300 billion on trying to stop a financial catastrophe. Next headline, Health Time Bomb. Delays for life-saving cancer treatment due to the coronavirus means that many will die as a result. Well, many papers are starting to highlight the hidden effects of the virus on health in general. And that's because most of the hospitals have not been accepting people with general conditions. It's only been accepting those with the coronavirus. So it's not just physical health, but mental health too. And it may be some time before we appreciate the true cost to life from illnesses other than COVID. In the tabloids, the main story today is about Johnny Depp, who is attending court in London, charged with assaulting his girlfriend. Headline today is, I went too far. Johnny Depp texted Amber Heard's dad to say sorry after he headbutted her, and that appears in the Sun newspaper. Another exclusive headline, Legally Blonde. Law firm bosses have been called out after apparent sexist remarks in a caption photograph stating that every law firm needs a beautiful new receptionist, and above that caption is a beautiful woman. It will be interesting to see how that one plays out in the courts. In our Daily Mail, the headline is, They've sunk our cruises. And that's on the back of the UK Foreign Office warning against all travel on cruise ships. Well, in Scotland, there has been a lifting of travel bans, and whereas anyone coming into the country had to go into quarantine for 14 days, that's now been lifted for certain countries. The one that remains in quarantine is Spain, and that has caused considerable consternation, noting that 60% of Scots use Spain and Spanish islands as a holiday destination. Some opposition parties are calling this a politically motivated decision. The Scottish National Party government came out in support of Catalonia, a region of Spain who wants independence. The Spanish government criticised Scotland's stance, and some say that the SNP government is getting its own back by imposing restriction on those coming in from Spain. As I say, these are just headlines and comments. So that's the headlines in brief in our newspapers today. It's a quick view, and I hope that you've enjoyed this sprint around our newspaper columns, especially those that asked for this special podcast. If this gets any traction, I would be happy to do this every month, or more often if there was the demand. Well, next week I will continue our tour of Skye and complete the third part of our tour trilogy. And what we'll be doing is we're going to see and hear about a castle belonging to the powerful MacLeod clan that's been in the family for over 800 years. You'll hear sad tales of clan battles, and you'll also hear about fairies that were part of 17th century life and are still considered to bring luck to the MacLeods. It's going to be a wonderful trip, so do join me then. Well, I hope that you've enjoyed this extra podcast on A View from Scotland through the eyes of our media. If you'd like me to repeat this experience, do get in touch by email at john@exclusivescottishvisits.co.uk or contact me through my website, Exclusive Scottish Visits. In the meantime, do not let any of the stories that you've heard about today spoil your day. Wherever you are, I'm sure there are numbers you can ring to obtain counselling if required. I do wish you well wherever you are, so from John Harbour of Exclusive Scottish Visits on this My Unique Scotland podcast, take care and stay safe.